Hello, welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Graham Wilson. We're constantly hearing conflicting advice about diets. One day something is good for you, and the next day a new study says it's not. So with so much information flying around, it's no wonder many of us feel confused about what we should be eating to stay healthy. The reality is that there may not be a one-size-fits-all answer. What works well for one person might not work for another. And that's where today's guest comes in. Dr Erin Clarke is a researcher with the Food and Nutrition Research Program at the Hunter Medical Research Institute, and she's exploring how our genetic and metabolic differences can influence the way that our bodies respond to food. Dr Clarke, welcome to Wellbeing.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What inspired you to focus your research on personalised nutrition and heart health particularly?
So I am both a researcher and a practicing dietitian. So in both aspects of my work, I have noticed that people seem to respond really differently to different dietary interventions. For example, in research, you might notice that some people have some really amazing results, where other people, their weight, their blood cholesterol levels, blood pressure might not respond at all. But you sort of only really see the averages of those reported in the literature. And then in clinical practice as well, when I see patients, it became really clear to me that if you recommend a low-salt diet to somebody with high blood pressure, some people may make amazing results. Their blood pressure may drop back to normal levels, while other people, it might not make any difference at all. So I was just seeing this big difference in how people responded to those diets. But the thing is, there's no way we can really predict at the moment who will be a responder to certain interventions versus who might not. So it's a bit of trial and error in practice, which can be a little bit disheartening. So that's really what inspired me to focus more on that personalised nutrition so that we can help identify who may be the best responders for different interventions to get the most out of their health.
Yeah, you mentioned personalised nutrition. So is that tailoring a program specifically to one person rather than a group of people?
Yeah, so there's no real set definition of personalised nutrition, but it can be tailoring it based on a lot of different characteristics. But a person is made up of multiple characteristics. For example, people have different individual behaviours, food preferences, lifestyles, or they might have multiple health conditions as well that we've got to manage. So it takes into account all of that to help provide the most targeted and tailored advice for the person sitting in front of us.
So could it be that, as the old adage said, one man's meat is another man's poison?
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of what it's coming down to, is someone might have such a great response to one thing, but for another person it may be quite detrimental to their health. And that's probably why you see things in the news even about different diets and how some people swear by it and other people, they're like, this made no difference, or it made me feel unwell. So it's a very, very unique how people respond.
Now, are you able to, as a practicing nutritionist, to be able to work out what on a case-by-case basis works for somebody and what's not? I mean, do you have to keep records of all of that and carefully test things?
Yeah, so usually we do sort of target it based on people's preferences, their priorities and their health goals as a starting point. And we do have to document all of that in our records. But people can also notice these things themselves as well. So they might notice, if you have a home blood pressure monitoring machine, or you can test your own blood sugar levels, how you respond to different foods as well. So all these different dietary changes, and you might notice some really great improvements if you do one thing, but if you do another thing, you might notice that, okay, this doesn't really affect me.
What are the chronic diseases that are best targeted by this sort of approach, by medical nutrition therapy? That term is out there, isn't it?
Yeah, so medical nutrition therapy is a perfect term to use. That's how dietitians tailor and personalise their therapy to that individual sitting in front of them. And there's definitely so many ways that we can help individuals with multiple health conditions. On the Dietitians Australia website, there's a whole list of all the conditions a dietitian can help with, but key ones might include things like food allergies, food intolerances, diabetes or prediabetes, heart disease, or even things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or weight management.
Okay, let's have a look at some of those in particular and the types of foods that might work and might be contraindicated. say for pre-diabetes, so that's somebody whose blood sugar levels are getting a little bit higher than they ought to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. So their blood sugars are a little bit they're not quite diagnosed as having type 2 diabetes, but it does put them at a risk of having that condition. So you want to get on top of that early.
And how would you treat that?
So there's many different ways, and again, depending on lots of different things about that person sitting in front of you, we can tailor a few different things. For example, we would do a very thorough sort of investigation into your history. So it might be things like your weight history, blood test results, any other health conditions you might have, food allergies, food intolerances, family history, even your goals and other dietary habits. And then we might dig a little bit deeper, specifically about carbohydrate-rich foods, as these are the main foods that can impact our blood sugar levels. So we might be asking more about like the types of breads and cereals that you have. Dairy foods, they can also impact it. So whether you're choosing like milks, yogurts, or you're going more for ice cream and custard can make a big difference. Fruits and veggies, how much of those you're eating, as well as what we call sometimes or discretionary foods, so like lollies, soft drinks, cakes and biscuits. So we would probably look at like the big picture of how much of these things you're having and how frequently you're eating these foods. And then we'd probably prioritise swapping these. So swapping those refined grains, so think white bread for wholemeal or whole grain bread, increasing your fibre intake with more fruits and veggies. If you also have an elevated weight or any weight concerns, you might want to reduce your total energy intake, and just how to balance meals as well so they're less likely to cause major spikes in your blood sugars. And this can also help with managing things like regular eating, appetite, and even managing those food cravings that can come because those very high sugar foods can be quite palatable.
Yeah. It seems that you're trying to lower sugar through all of those modalities that you're talking about there. You know, look hard at what they're eating. There are lower sugar versions of most of those foods that you're talking about, but, you know, leave out things like ice cream because of the sugar in it, although there are alternatives to that are low sugar, aren't there?
Yeah, so that's the good thing with the food supply now is there's much more lower sugar options. Like you said, even ice cream, there's low sugar, low fat versions out there, so they're better. But yeah, you still want to make sure you're eating a lot more of those whole grain based and high fibre options as well, so less processed foods.
Is this kind of recommendation, you know, we mentioned this one size fits all. Is it a general rule for everybody because they're human, we're all built, you know, with the same organs after all, that we should be eating lower sugar foods, or can some people handle it and others can't?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, we don't really know how it affects everyone individually. We do know on a very basic level that foods like whole grains, fruits and veggies, they play a really important role in helping keep everybody's blood sugar in check. But some people may also find that, like, if we all ate the same piece of bread, our blood sugars would all react very differently. So some people may actually need a higher fibre or a much more higher grain version of the same product. So it can make it a bit hard to know exactly how the type of response you're going to have. And that's where one-size-fits-all approaches, they don't really take into consideration that, as well as other things like our food preferences, money as well, like financial constraints, as well as cooking skills and all of that. So there's a lot more that we can do than just the one-size-fits-all approach.
Sure. My guest today on Wellbeing is Dr Erin Clarke, who's a researcher with the Food and Nutrition Research Program at the Hunter Medical Research Institute. Do you know why two people who might eat the same meal would respond differently to it? I mean, what's happening in their bodies that makes them assimilate the food differently?
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to learn a little bit more about. So there might be a few things that can impact that. So there's you've got to consider like your whole diet, not just like that one single food that you're having. People's genetics, so we can't change that. But we did some work with geneticists last year and we found that this is regarding salt intake, but people who had a higher genetic risk in how they metabolize salt or sodium, they actually had higher blood pressure if they ate a high salt diet compared to people who had a lower genetic risk. So there's definitely a genetic component to it. Other things they've also found that like how we metabolize the food, or the gut microbiome. So that's like those little bugs that can also impact how we respond. So there's a lot of things that we're still learning about that can make a big difference, and that's what we're hoping to figure out, so we can see who exactly will be a responder versus who might not be a responder.
Can you just explain a bit more about the microbiome and, what's happening there?
Yeah, so it's a very exciting area that we're doing a little bit more research in. So I'll just keep it really simple. So there's all these gut bugs within our intestines, and they help break down food. For example, like carbohydrate-rich foods, they produce short-chain fatty acids, which can help lower our blood pressure, and that's all produced by those little gut bugs as well. There's other ones that can also influence like our mental health by producing chemicals such as tryptophan, which can improve our mental health outcomes as well. So like there's lots of cool things that we're finding. But yeah, there's no exact sort of ratio of the different types of gut bugs that we want, that we know yet, that mean that you have an ideal gut microbiome versus a less ideal one. So we're still sort of figuring that bit out.
So we think that is why people may react differently to the same foods.
Yeah, exactly.
The presence of the bacteria that make up that microbiome?
Yeah. For example, again, like if we go back to those short-chain fatty acid producing microbiome bugs, if you have less of those, you might actually not respond as great to like a blood pressure lowering intervention, or you might respond better because you have more capacity to build that up. So we're still trying to tease out exactly how it works. But that's definitely like that makeup seems to be playing a big role in how we respond.
What is your current research addressing, Erin?
Yeah, so I'm trying to investigate different biomarkers, so like metabolites and genetic variants that might influence how we respond to these different dietary interventions. So we're trying to help advance assessment for individuals to identify who may respond best to different interventions. So whether it's a high fiber diet, a low sodium, high potassium sort of diet, so we can figure that out. So we're trying to identify firstly if we call a metabolic signature. So essentially this is like a fingerprint to help us identify what a healthy versus unhealthy diet might look like, and how we can use that to sort of track someone's change in their metabolism and what they're eating over time. And this might be a way to find out who might actually respond to the different interventions, or how much they actually need to eat. Like some people might think they're eating really well, and they might actually be eating really well, but they need to eat more of certain foods to be able to get that healthy metabolic signature. With the long-term goal to sort of help develop a triaging pathway so that we can then identify who should see a dietitian versus who might, need other treatment options that might be more effective for them.
Right. So some things are going to respond very well to changes in what you eat, and other things may actually need surgery or a pill or something else.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, going back to blood pressure, there may be people that all they have to do is cut out their salt intake, have a very low sodium diet, whereas other people, they might have to work a little bit harder. So it doesn't matter even if they eat a low salt diet their entire life, their blood pressure might still be high, and those people might actually need to be a candidate for medication instead. Okay.
The diet that seems to be coming to the fore these days is a plant-based diet, primarily plant-based. There are people who will say, I couldn't possibly go vegetarian or vegan, I need meat. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's many, again, like most things in nutrition, many definitions of a plant-based diet, but it is moving less away from having to go strictly vegan or vegetarian, and is mostly focusing on more a plant-forward diet, so where you're trying to make up the most of your eating patterns with those plant-based foods. So again, it's like fruits, veggies, whole grains, legumes, and then lower intakes of meats as well. And so they've been shown to be really beneficial for most people as well, and have been associated with lower risks of heart disease and diabetes. So I think if you're going to try and pick a pattern, it can be a really useful one, and it doesn't mean you have to cut out meat completely.
Sure, there was a time when a plate was filled with meat and not many vegetables, probably a carbohydrate like potato and maybe one vegetable, yeah?
Yeah, and that seems to be still quite a traditional way a lot of people eat, but I do think people are moving forward with having noticed that they probably do need to add a bit more colour to their plate as well.
How do people learn about this? You know, how accessible is nutrition information to people?
Yeah, it's very accessible, but the thing is, if you have like a preference or a bias, or how you search things can also make a difference on how you find this information as well. So, for example, if you're interested in a lower carb diet, if you search a low carb diet's good for health, most of the information that will come up will be positive about that. Whereas if you search a low carb diet's bad for health, you might more likely to find the negatives of that as well. So I'd recommend really like looking at the sources that you're reading. Does the person have qualifications that are relevant? Are they a dietitian? Do they have the expertise to sort of break it down for you as well? Otherwise, I'd go to sort of like the big sort of groups, so like the Heart Foundation, Diabetes Australia, to sort of find that more targeted information that is more evidence.
Yeah. My guest today on Wellbeing is Dr Erin Clarke, who's a researcher with the Food and Nutrition Research Program at the Hunter Medical Research Institute. Now, a personalised nutrition service, you know, where you might need some more detailed information specific to yourself, how accessible are the services around that? Obviously, you could find a nutritionist. Mainly, is that available through clinics, or can you get it from an app, for instance?
Yeah, so Dietitians Australia has a Find a Dietitian site, so you can just put in your postcode and it'll come up with a list of dietitians near you. And a lot of dietitians also offer telehealth appointments now as well, so whether it's over the phone or video appointments, so it's a lot more accessible. You don't even need to have a referral. You can self-refer to see a dietitian. But if you are someone that does have a chronic health condition, you may be eligible for rebated appointments under your GP through a chronic disease management plan. And so it might be worth talking to your GP to see if you're eligible for that, because you can get up to 5 subsidised appointments a year.
What changes do you see happening it's too soon to say what your research will find, but, you know, you have hopes for it. What changes would you hope for in the public health system as a result of the kind of research that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm really hoping, again, it comes back to that sort of triaging effect so that we can identify how we can best allocate our resources. So who will be a responder to these dietary interventions and who might need early intervention as well. That way we can get on top of it before people end up with heart disease or diabetes, so we can sort of stop that process early on. I think that will be a really big factor. The other thing is, I think, integrating more technology into clinical care as well will be really important to help target and tailor that advice, because currently we have to refer people to their GP to get a blood test. So hopefully in the future it's a bit more like point of care assessments are available to us.
What do you see as the future of nutrition and chronic disease prevention? Are we moving toward fully individualised diets?
That would be a lovely long-term goal. I really hope we do get there, but I think that might be a little bit much further into the future. I think people are definitely noticing that not everything, like what works for them or works for their friend, doesn't necessarily work for their neighbour. So people are becoming a bit more aware that just because one diet works for one person, doesn't mean it's going to work for them as well. So I think people are getting more interested in that targeted and individualised approach. And so I'm hoping, with all of these expansions in technology and research, that we can identify those people a lot easier.
Are you finding, as a practicing nutritionist, that there are typical things that people will come to see you for and that you could then apply to a wide part of the population?
Yeah, so I think a really key thing is that a lot of people, so less than 5% of the Australian population, actually eat enough fruit and veggies. And that is a big thing I still see in practice as well, is that people are eating fruit and veggies, but they're not really eating as much as we would recommend. So I think that's a big thing that could be applied to pretty much everybody, that eating more of those, because there's really strong evidence that if everyone ate even like an extra serve or two of fruit and veggies, it can have major health impacts on like their blood pressure levels and that as well. And if you're eating the recommendations, there's a large percentage reduction in those chronic disease risks. So I think that's something, if anyone's going to take anything away, eat more fruit and veggies.
And do you know why fruit and veggies are so good?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things within the fruit and veggies that are beneficial. So they're a great source of fibre, vitamins and minerals, but they also have what we call like phytochemicals, which can be really beneficial for health. So you might have heard of things like polyphenols and carotenoids. They also work in the body to help sort of reduce inflammation, and they can have an antioxidant sort of effect, which can also help improve your overall health as well. So there's a lot packed into them. So eating a good variety and a good number of colours can be really important for helping with that as well.
This research that you're doing, you're collaborating with people around the world, are you not?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to have some amazing professors in Ireland collaborate with us, as well as some people at the University of Newcastle and around Australia as well. So I've been very fortunate to be able to work with a good variety of people.
Are you heading towards the next big milestone in the project?
It's still early days, so we're just sort of getting the ball rolling. But we're hoping to sort of have a new project up and running this year, looking at how we can tailor diets to blood pressure in people with type 2 diabetes, because there's a really strong relationship between the two. So keep your eyes out for that, because we'll be recruiting soon.
Okay. All right. And just as we finish up, what's a simple thing that people can do today to improve their heart health through diet?
Eat more fruit and veggies. That's a really big one. And I think just keep it simple. I know people are in like a bit of a cost of living crisis. So don't feel like you've got to go out and buy only organic. You can use things like frozen and tinned fruits and veggies as well. They're just as nutritious, to sort of still get those foods in rather than having to buy everything fresh.
And have you got recommendations on how to make it appetizing? A lot of people say, oh, no, it's not interesting food.
Yeah, well, definitely that can be one of the hardest things about eating more veggies and fruit. You know, you don't want to feel like you're a rabbit just eating carrots or lettuce by itself. So definitely adding some flavour there and incorporating it as part of a big meal. I also work with Professor Claire Collins at the University of Newcastle, who has a website called No Money, No Time. And that is a great resource for how to make healthy food cheap, but also include enough fruits and veggies into your diet as well. So I'll give her a plug.
Thanks, Erin. I appreciate your time today, and all the best with the research project, and thank you for what you're doing for the health of the nation.
No, thank you for having me.
I've been talking to Dr Erin Clarke, a researcher with the Food and Nutrition Research Program at the Hunter Medical Research Institute in Newcastle, where she's exploring how our genetic and metabolic differences can influence the way our bodies respond to food. I'm Graham Wilson. Thanks for listening, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.